I'm going to show a game which I played on the internet this morning. The time controls was 15 minutes per game, and I was playing with the white pieces. The game shows why it's important to never relax and to never play against your opponent's time trouble. So I was playing with the white pieces and I opened with e4. We got into the Sicilian defense. Black is playing the time and the variation, which is characterized by leaving the diagonal open for this bishop. He could play now pawn to d6 and transpose into Scheveningen, but instead he continues with the time off, and he plays bishop b4. The downside to this is that the dark squares are a little bit weakened, and white immediately exploits that, so the knight is aiming to b6. Now it would be dangerous for black to take on e4 with, say, knight to e4, even though the pawn is not protected. It's a risky variation, because at some point white's going to play bishop to f3, capture on c6, invade to b6, and black's king is still in the center, so it's not really recommended. And also black's pieces would become a little bit loose. There are already a couple of them that came out. It would be difficult to protect them, so this line is too dangerous for black. So he retreats to e7. Now that my knight is misplaced somewhat, so I have to continue with the maneuver of the knight. I have obtained a bishop pair here, but the price for that was opening up the b file for black's rook, and also strengthening black's center, and if at some point he gets to play d5, he'll have a good position. So I have to play according to the specific position, so I have to exploit the fact that there's still a hole on d6, attacking the knight. And now the main line is bishop to c1, and then the bishop is kind of safe, but I played a slightly more aggressive move with bishop d4. This of course protects the b pawn for the time being, but at the same time this bishop is not very stable here, so black attacks it with c5. If I retreat to c3, I would have a ruined pawn structure, so I have to counterattack with c4. We exchanged, and now this pawn structure is a little bit imbalanced. Black has to be careful to make sure he doesn't end up with inferior pawn structure. Say, it wouldn't be too wise to capture here, because then I would probably capture here, and I would just have pressure against the weak pawns. And the material here is still even. So black continues in the aggressive way. He captures on b2. The main line is queen to c5, kind of trying to protect the d pawn. But indirectly, rook to b2 also protects the pawn, because, say, if I was to take, that would be a mistake. I would lose a piece. So the pawn is still indirectly guarded, even though I really want to take it. So I play rook to c1. This makes sense because I just want to exploit the fact that the black pieces are a little bit disorganized, and say the queen doesn't have a terribly good square for retreat. If, say, he goes to b8, that's fine, but this will allow me some opportunity to capture the a pawn. Maybe not immediately, but that's just a downside of going to b8. So black played queen to b7 instead. That has the advantage of putting pressure on the b pawn, but it doesn't put the pressure, this does put the pressure on the d pawn, but it doesn't put the pressure on the e5 pawn, and it also walks into this diagonal that I may want to attack on. So I play bishop here. This threatens d6 in case of a2. sorry, in case of rook a2, then I can play this and win the piece. This also, well, now I'm also threatening to capture on d4 because the bishop is not under attack anymore. At the same time, I was thinking if he takes, well, then I can take here, and this also indirectly protects the pawn because then there's this fork with bishop to d5. So that looked reasonable. My opponent, however, moved the queen from the attack diagonal, and he went to b4, discards the pawn, resumes the threats, and well, black is prepared to castle. Now I need to somehow revive my initiative because otherwise he'll just castle, I'll be down a pawn. I have to be playing energetically. At the same time, if I shut down his bishop, that doesn't really seem to be promising very much. He'll just come out and I won't have enough for the pawn. So instead I played capture. So now if he takes with the d pawn, then I can open up his king. And this would be good for white because even though I'm down a pawn, we have bishops of opposite color on the board. And in these positions, attack is worth more than a little material investment. The fact that this rook is stuck here would be very important. So of course he has to keep that diagonal closed, so he takes with the f pawn. Now if I was to check from here, then he would shut down the attack with g6 on time. So here I calculated the variation that seemed logical. So I could go bishop to e4, threatening queen h5. So say he castles, I attack. Too dangerous to shut things down this way, and then I would come in. So he probably has to bail with g6, and then it's a draw. I don't really have enough time to bring any one of my rooks to the third rank or whatever. That just doesn't look realistic. So here, I mean, he may even try something like this. It just doesn't look real. So I would probably have to settle with a draw here, with the perpetual, and so on. So I was a little bit ahead on time here, and it just didn't seem all that necessary to get a draw. So I saw a little bit of an improvement to this line, and I thought if I throw in rook to c8, and after bishop d8, I then play bishop e4, it no longer seems as good for black to castle, because the same line with castle, queen h5, takes, now has a disadvantage for black, because now this bishop here is vulnerable. So I can play this, get the rook back, and I have an extra material, and black's king is exposed. I may be able to collect these pawns. It would be a little bit of a challenge getting my rook out, but it just looked good anyway. So he has to play g6. Here I have a choice. I can play queen to d3, which I considered hitting here and possibly threatening a sacrifice on g6. But I thought, well, it's a rapid game, so I should be playing energetic moves. And black's king is still uncastled, so rather than go for the a pawn, which seems unimportant, I should probably transfer my queen to the king side and increase the pressure. So I play this, queen to g4, threatening bishop to g6. And the same way, if he castles, I mean, the same ideas still apply. So I'm building up the pressure, and black has to think how to defend. He can't castle in a natural way, and it's just getting a little bit tricky. And there's some problems he has to solve. So this was probably a good idea. Queen e7. That brings the queen back. I thought I could try this, and naturally he cannot do that. He cannot block with the queen because of the sacrifice on d8. But it just doesn't seem enough if he goes here. Maybe I can try to play something like that, but it just seems like it would backfire because at some point he may be able to play this and then put pressure against g2. It just didn't seem good enough. So I thought, okay, I need to build up the pressure again, and I play h4, and again I was thinking if he castles, well, then I could play h5, and I'm down a pawn, but I can keep generating some threats. And this was reminding me a little bit of the game Kramnik against Nakamura, or Nakamura against Kramnik, which I was seeing the other day, where also we had opposite color bishops and white was attacking on g6. So h4, now he has to move the king, and he's starting to get a little bit low in time, maybe down to 3 or 4 minutes here. Especially after h5, he was thinking for a while, and I have some pressure, I have a dangerous attack, his pieces are tied up, I have extra time. So this was looking really, really good, but I relaxed, and my opponent found a good plan. He played rook to g8, and now what he wants to do, he wants to transfer the king over here and just be safe. And here I kind of lost the thread of the game, and this is what cost me possibly the full point. So I play h6, preventing the king from escaping. Rook f8. He still has this clever idea of how he would castle by artificial means. He would just bring the king over here and run away again. So I was kind of running out of ideas here. I still have the pressure, but I just didn't have the patience to maintain that pressure. So bishop to d3, a5, queen d4. I got my pawn back, and it's looking not bad. But he gets to activate his pieces here, and this is where I really collapsed. I could have played a number of moves here. I'm not down on material anymore. I could possibly have taken on g5. There were some interesting ideas. I could maybe play this and threaten the pawn. But I thought a good way to maintain pressure and possibly generate more threats was to play f4, f5. And there was a good reason why I didn't play it earlier. I didn't play it earlier because I was afraid of weakening my king, of weakening my second rank, and before the king was on e8 and the bishop was not able to move to b6. So that wasn't that big of a problem. But now it's even worse. So after I play f4, my position is completely collapsing. And even though my opponent had only 30 seconds, he managed to exploit his advantages very well. And here I made another really big mistake. I just completely overlooked, well, I didn't quite overlook, but I didn't realize the consequences of this move. I should have just taken on d8 and tried to win on time. Instead I played queen g3, and it turned out after this that A, I'm losing a rook here, and B, my king has no good moves, so I'm completely lost. And the game only lasted a few more moves. Even though my opponent is low on time, he plays very quickly, and he checkmated me in like 5 moves here. So here is the critical moment. I had extra time, I had a good complicated position on the board, and I just had to be alert to the opportunities of my opponent and not weaken my king too much. So a good lesson for me and somewhat interesting game, and that's that.